Hey everyone, my name is Ben Chaish, and this is going to be my full review of the amazing FUJIFILM X100V. Now, if you haven't seen it, I definitely suggest you go and watch my first impressions review of this camera, as I kind of go over a lot of the features and the reasons why I picked this up in the first place. There's a ton of stuff and information in that video, as well as even some samples kind of right off the bat, and I feel like it gives you a good idea what to expect. So I'm gonna try to make all these as practical as possible. If you follow this channel at all, hopefully the feeling you get out of this is kind of just like a sitting down chat, like I'm trying to explain, you know, what this camera is like to you over coffee or something like that. So I'm gonna go into kind of usability and all that kind of stuff. I'll skip most of the specs because there are plenty of other videos and spec sheets you can look at, but I'll let you know what things have lived up to the hype and what things are So right off the bat, the improvement of the lens is fantastic. Like this thing, this tiny, tiny little lens is in the same realm as some of even my Leica camera lenses. You know, it's not gonna be perfect corner to corner, it's not gonna be as sharp, so maybe it doesn't necessarily rival the, you know, $6,000 Leica lenses that I have, but I would have no problems at all considering this camera and this lens in particular a professional use case. Everything that I've gotten out of it has been plenty sharp, more sharp even than technically I need. I feel like my tolerance for sharpness at times, and especially for a personal camera, is, you know, like not crazy high. I feel like it's practical, and for all practical purposes, this lens performs and performs beautifully. Usability wise, as far as the other functions and stuff, I actually really love using the hybrid viewfinder. I wasn't sure if I was going to like that or not. And one of the things that I did add was the custom function down there to kind of change in and out. I moved it to this front dial here. So I have the ability to use the optical viewfinder here and then have the little preview, you know, screen. I'll try to find a way to film this, but there's a tiny little EVF, like a micro little one. And it gives you the option of either zooming all the way into whatever you're focusing on to check critical focus. So like right now I can see that like EOS and R on my camera are in focus, or you can click it, zoom out a little bit more, or click it again and you get the entire scene. And it gives me that like analog rangefinder-esque experience. I wouldn't say that it feels actually like a rangefinder, but it feels like if any company made a modern point and shoot film camera and they made it to this size and specs and everything like that, and they could put a little, you know, EVF and all that information into a tiny viewfinder, that is like the most ideal thing. So it's still in that mode, feels a lot like a point and shoot, but like the best point and shoot film camera that I've ever used. The other thing for me that was kind of like the new feature that, you know, people weren't exactly sure about was this kind of like flip screen. A lot of the things that I mentioned in my first review and first impressions, I still feel kind of in tune with. I do wish, again, that you could go vertical with it. The fact that you can't rotate it, you know, this other direction so you could do this is kind of a bummer. But in general, this thing focuses and functions exactly how I would want to. I use it for my kids all the time when I just like and want to sit up on like couch level or some other level, but want to get a photo of them in like, I have a 4-month-old now and he's in a little jumper. And so I want to like take a photo of him, but I don't want to like lay down on the floor, you know, flip the little flip screen up, take a photo, get whatever perspective I want. It is clutch. Now, the other thing that I actually was getting surprised by as I mentioned this is the autofocus capabilities of this camera. The crazy thing is I'm filming and the only thing I'm referencing is my tiny, you know, like flip screen on the EOS R right here. And this thing, I have it set up for face tracking. And from here, it's really, really small on the screen, and it is grabbing my face, even that small in the frame, and picked up that that is the thing it should be focusing on, which is pretty phenomenal and pretty fantastic. In general, I found it to be really good at face tracking and all that kind of stuff, using it in continuous mode. The autofocus has been on par. It has met my expectations, which again were pretty high for this camera. Another thing that I've been super impressed with on this camera is just the way that it exposes and its auto features. I have very rarely, I've probably taken 15 photos or something like without using just full auto, and this thing has been a champion in that regard. I've kept the ISO on auto, just maxed it out at 12,800, which is kind of like the max I feel good about shooting this camera on. But again, for a camera this small and pocketable and incredibly portable, it can shoot stuff that personally I find to be completely usable at 12,800 ISO. The lens goes down to f2. It gives you a ridiculous amount of situations that you can shoot in. I set the minimum shutter speed to 1/125th of a second, or maybe 1/60th. I think I've bounced back and forth between the two. And then just having everything set itself has been amazing. And the other thing about this is that the RAW files on here, I'm used to Leica cameras, and those Leicas have very, very little information in the highlights, where this thing like has probably two, it feels like, don't quote me on this, but it feels like it has 2 extra stops of latitude in the highlights specifically. There's photos that I took like when we were in the car, wherever it exposed for like our faces, and then behind us was totally, completely gone. But then once I pulled it into Lightroom or whatever and just checked to see how far I could pull it back, boom, all of a sudden I had like full detail in the window behind me, where I know that my, $7,000 Leica camera would have 0 information there. Now, that's not to say that the Leica is obviously a bad camera. It just has more information shoved kind of in the lower end. But just knowing that if you're getting kind of like a normalized exposure, I'm shooting this camera at negative like 2/3 of a stop. That usually on most cameras gives me enough information in the highlights and enough in the shadows to kind of push things forward. So slightly underexposed, but usually renders the most dynamic range and gives me a really, really workable image. As far as how this thing meters and all that stuff, I have not had a single photo yet that was unusable by just using the auto settings. So cheers to you, Fujifilm, for making a pretty foolproof camera in a lot of ways. Now, I haven't tested it out to the max yet, but one of the things I did pick up was the Moment Cinebloom filter, which let me know if you guys want me to do a video specifically on that. I've actually been filming my videos on the EOS R. It has like the 10% on there, just as a little softener on there. But I have a 10% for this as well. And then I bought just a filter adapter so that I can have this be weather sealed. I haven't tried it out in like extreme conditions before, but I'm gonna just trust that Fujifilm knows what they're talking about. And so another massive plus of having this camera is after testing this, I feel 100% confident that if my whole Leica setup went down, I could do a good job. This camera would function well enough that I could shoot the rest of a wedding with just this camera and be fine enough that my clients wouldn't be losing out on anything too significantly. I'd say that, it's not like this camera is inexpensive at $1,400 by any means, but for all the features that it packs in, to the size and just the overall experience, I could not recommend this camera enough. I would honestly just say that if you are a professional photographer or do this in any way that you could get a tax write-off, I would say that having this in your bag, even just as a backup and then a family camera, is kind of a no-brainer. So thanks so much for watching. If you have any more questions about this camera, please feel free to drop those in the comments below. I try to be really good about connecting and making sure that all of that information gets kind of just sent down there. I'll also add links to all the just accessories that I bought, from the filter adapters to the filter to the strap, the square hood, all that good stuff. And another slight thing of note that you might have noticed if you were really paying attention to my videos is I have removed the shutter release thing here. I had a lot of people saying that they've had issues in the past with adding a shutter release, that it's broken the shutter mechanism and kind of gotten them in trouble. It's also just a little bit wiggly. I think both of the cameras are a little bit, so I didn't want to put too much pressure on it. So I have removed that and taken a lot of your advice in the comments. So I appreciate any information that you can give me. So thanks so much again, and I will see you guys on the next one.